Hello, and a very exciting welcome back to Track Talk Live. My name is Leah. I am here with our model railroad expert, Doug Hodgdon. Welcome, Doug.
Well, welcome to you, and welcome to everybody out there.
That's right. This is our first show of 2021, but we are back. We are on a brand new set, so we are very excited to get things off and running. And I have a couple reminders before we really dig in and get to chatting. So first, if you're new here or just need a refresher, a big part of this show is question and answer, and that means you're going to want to use our chat box. So I'm going to have my computer here where I'll see your questions coming in through the time that we have together, and there is a dark blue chat box right under the video player for you to use. Please feel free to drop your comments, ask your questions, and I'd encourage you right now to practice using it. Say hi in the chat box. Let us know where you're joining us from and anything else that you'd like to share with the community. And I'm going to see those questions pop up so that I can ask them to Doug throughout our time together today. So go ahead and hop those hellos in. I know our team behind the scenes has already dropped a comment in there as well. They're keeping an eye on things for us on the technical side. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and introduce officially Doug. Doug, it has been a long time.
Well,
Welcome
no kidding.
back.
It sure has.
What have you been up to in all of that time in quarantine? Let us know.
Well, you know, I guess one of the good things about model railroading, you're doing it at home.
Yes.
And so you don't really have to go anyplace, and so that's basically what happened. I was at home. Well, of course, I was doing things around the house too, but model railroading, a lot of little things that I probably should have done before that I didn't do, and so my railroad is, largely finished, and so there's always detailing.
All right.
So I have a lot of parts. I have decades worth of parts that I've collected, and so I put these parts to use. The parts don't do you any good in a little plastic box.
No.
You gotta use them, and so that's basically what I did. I made kind of a priority list of things I wanted to do, and went through my parts and see what I had. I mean, I did, I did do online shopping, and I got some things I didn't have, but basically, I used a lot of parts that I already had, which was pretty neat.
Perfect.
So.
All right, well, we would like to hear from you as well watching. How did you spend your quarantine? Was there any particular projects that you're super excited about sharing with the community? You can go ahead and put those in the chat as well. I know, Doug, you mentioned that we're really excited to start up this community again and get things rolling. We have our first hello in the chat box from Winnipeg. Hello, Ed. Thank you for joining. It's very exciting to have viewers from all over.
Hello, Winnipeg.
All right, before we get into some photos, I know Doug has selected to share with us to get us started. A couple things that I'd like to point out, Doug. I know that you attached a camera to a train car and it traveled through some of your favorite layouts. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. A mini camera put on a flat car. This was HO in the most cases. We did some other ones, but mostly HO, and pushed by the locomotive. Now this particular scene is on Bill Briggs, Muscle Shell, and Yogo Peak, and we've had a lot of still pictures online before showing this model railroad.
Yeah, and you can check out even more layouts if you go and sign up for the free Inside the Track experience. So to do that, you'll want to click on the banner below or the link in the description if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and you will not want to miss this. Again, this is some of that footage that you're talking about from attaching a camera to a train car, sending it through some of your favorite layouts.
Well, while we're doing this, I want to tell you an interesting story about this. Now, this model railroad, Bill Briggs had passed away quite a few years ago, and it's about a 1,500 square foot model railroad, and finally we got to the point where it had to be moved. And so we ended up donating it to the Mississippi Coast Model Railroad Museum in Gulfport, Mississippi. And they are working on putting it back together as we speak. We sent 3 trailer loads down there, believe it or not. 3 trailer loads, and toward the end of this, we'll show you a picture of them putting it back up. But I recommend, if anybody is down in that area, go see what they're doing. It's a great museum, and they have a lot of other there it is right there, down in Gulfport. They have a lot of other model railroad things going on, and outdoor things for kids, and it's a tremendous museum. So by all means, go and see it. And then, by the way, one other little tidbit is that the last truck driver left last week. And so he's a really super guy. His name was Campbell.
Oh.
And he lives in Baton Rouge. So he went through Baton Rouge on the way down there and picked up his son. It was a big model railroad nut. He's 10 years old, and so he took his son in the truck with him down to the Model Railroad Museum down there in Gulfport, and his son got a complete tour of the museum, and I think that's just wonderful. So I want to do a shout out to Donovan, my new 10-year-old model train buddy.
Absolutely. Well, hello, Donovan. Hopefully you're checking us out here today. We are headed to something exciting next. We're going to feature some of our member layouts. Before we get into some of those photos, did you know that Model Railroad Academy has a community layout gallery? Maybe you did, maybe this is a reminder, but maybe you're new and you're just hearing about it for the first time. You can submit your own layout photos to share with the entire MRA community. And we encourage you to share your photos on Instagram. We have a hashtag. It's hashtag ShareMRA. Again, that's share the word MRA for Model Railroad Academy. And you can, of course, follow us there at Model Railroad Academy. And we feature layouts on Instagram pretty regularly, so it's an amazing community to check out. And that said, we're going to dig into some of the layouts that you've chosen to feature.
Let's go through that. I mean, there's so many, and we just picked out a few. And the other thing I wanted to mention that during COVID, you know, I'm really interested in the theatrics. There's a lot of theatrics involved in model building. Obviously, you know, you're working at a smaller scale, and for example, HO scale, a scale mile is 60 feet. Well, of course, you know, how many people have a
60 feet.
huge auditorium to build a model railroad in? So there's a lot of compression that goes on, and a lot of scenic tricks that you use, and a lot of that just is based on theatrics. And so that's partly what I was doing in my layout, and I'll show you a backdrop thing I've been working on in a bit, maybe after we show the pictures here.
Yes, we did have our first photo pop up briefly. I'm going to bring it back here. This is submitted by Andy B. at Dartside Scenics, and this is titled Bluebell Woodland, so we're going to feature this here.
Well, look at here. I mean, here's an example. You don't even need trains in the picture. I mean, look at this for a diorama. This is fantastic. I mean, just look at this. I mean, it's beautiful. And so not that you can't incorporate this into your model railroad, because you can, but if there are people who just like making dioramas.
Yes.
And so maybe the trains can be a background piece or something, or who knows what. Maybe you're just doing a village and want to do this kind of scenery. But look at this. I mean, this is fantastic, and there's a lot of things you can learn, theatric tricks you can learn to make this kind of thing happen. The backdrop, look at the backdrop back there, the hazy background to give you the feeling of depth. So yeah, I mean, that's just a tremendous picture, I think.
All right, let's move on to our next photos. These next few have all been submitted by Richard R. at R. Ridgely 52. And this first one, it says, is loading out of finished lumber at R&K Planning Mill. Thoughts on this one?
Well, there you go. And I like, well, any kind of open loads on a railroad are interesting. You know, a boxcar, everything's hidden inside, but open loads can be really interesting. They can be a myriad of things. Well, and here you can see that you see the logs going into the mill in the background, and a little steam donkey engine back there that's probably maybe towing the logs into the mill. And finished lumber being loaded onto a truck trailer. Boo, by the way. And then also lumber being loaded on flat cars.
All right, well, let's move on to our next shot. Again, this is still from Richard here. This looks like the overall shot of the R&K sawmill, the mill pond, and the lumber loading shed. So what are you noticing here in this photo? Well,
I mean, there's so much going on. Now, here you see the raw logs being pulled in. In the other shot, we saw the finished lumber. Well, here's the raw logs coming in, and they're at a log dump. So they're dumping the logs into this log pond, which was very typical. And then they'd float them over to the mill and go up the tramway into the mill and be sawed up into the finished lumber.
All right, and our last photo in this series, this is the logging cars spotted to unload with another string, waiting to pull the empties and spot the loaded.
So I mean, the other thing about model railroading, I think that's important, is you have to put together a backstory. I mean, why did this happen? Why are people doing this? Why is that log train there? You know, I'll have it put together a backstory, because that will really make your model railroad scenes look more believable. So you think them through and create, even if it's fiction, you know, just create a backstory.
Yes. All right, we're going to move into another submission. So our next photo is submitted by Thomas P. TFSR Rel 60. And this looks like the On 30 Rustic Buff and Old Gothic Railroad. Doug, what are you seeing?
Was this a European? I forget where he was located. Was it say on there?
I don't have that information
here. There are a couple
no.
of European shots in here, but the narrow gauge was always fascinating to model, because usually they were built in a smaller budget and they're kind of creaky and rickety and just have a lot of character to them. And this is a great scene that shows a little bit of everything. Loads coming in, canvas covered loads. You got a tank car over there and some fuel tanks in the background and another factory of some sort in the back. A lot of freight dock. So a lot of stuff going on in a very small space. And that's at least for me, I think that for me, I like to go for quality. The quantity, you don't have to have a monster layout to have fun. The quality, to me, is the really important thing, and to tell a story.
Lots of details in this one. All right, let's go to our next photo. This one's submitted by Craig V. This is a great quote. It says, "Hey, the dog's gone across the tracks and is in the sheep paddock again." It's from my Australian outline layout.
Oh, see, Australian. I've seen some Australian modeling at various shows, and these guys are really good. I mean, they do some really good work. They have their own magazine down there and everything. But yeah, there again, I mean, it's just a great scene. Whether you have a train in it or not, it's just a great scene, I think.
Okay, we have another set coming up next. All three of these next photos have been submitted by Andy B. at South Hams Model Rail. And this first one is Moorland Diorama.
Now there again. Now it looks like he took this picture outside by the background. It looks so perfect, and of course sunlight is good. If you have a diorama, take it outside and take a picture in the real sunshine. Most model railroads are underlit, and with LEDs you can actually do a better job now than you could with incandescents. But still, it looks like this was outside, and there's no railroad in sight. But just look at all the storytelling that's going on in this scene. It looks like a kind of a wall along the backside of maybe a stone wall along the backside of the road, and a little bridge and a pond, and a lot going on in that little scene.
Now this next photo, the next two, it looks like are small layouts based on Devon in the 1960s.
Oh, so
what are you noticing here?
Devon, England, I imagine. So, there again, I mean, look at the stone wall along the base of the road there, and a stone arch bridge that's probably a railroad bridge. And look at the garden. I mean, a little greenhouse there and planting beds, and there's so much going on in this little space. The fence, there's going to be a road bridge down there that we can't really see from this angle, but a lot going on, and I think that's the important thing. You want something to keep your eye busy with when you're looking at something like this.
Yes, and it looks like the next photo also features that stone arch bridge, but from a different angle with some other details.
So there you go. There's the railroad bridge. We're seeing more of the railroad bridge now, and the stream. And rocks in the background there. Yeah, just looks like cows maybe right in the field in the background there.
Yes.
And maybe a gate on the road that I see.
Lots of details in this one too. The water feature especially.
Sometimes I'll be doing something completely different, and something will pop into my mind. Oh yeah, I could do this, and crazy, but that's how it worked. We drive along in the car. Oh yeah. And you get these little ideas, these creative ideas, and it's good. Just don't crash your car when you're doing it. But
please don't do that. Okay, we're getting towards the end of our photos. We have just a few more, so if you are thinking of any questions, you want to start dropping them into the chat box. Very briefly, we'll be getting into the Q&A portion of this, but first, we're getting into our next photo, and this one is submitted by Will O, BMW Courier. It's the ATSF Super Chief at Christmas Rocks. And some details on here. This is an N-scale module designed for under the Christmas tree.
Well, this is a pretty good model railroad for just under the Christmas tree. I think you could do it year-round, but look, for N-scale, N-scale is tricky because it's small, and so it's very detail-oriented because of the small size, and you have to make up for that with what he's done here. A perfectly ballasted track. It looks like the track has been weathered, so you only see the top of the rail, not the shiny sides. And shrubbery along the base of the embankment there, and you can see some rock talus and things down below. And then, of course, behind the train there you see some what looks like probably rock castings, I'm guessing, like plaster rock castings, but Yeah, I mean, that really sets the stage. I mean, that's probably a very small area in a model railroad, but it says a lot, I think.
All right, we've come to our final photo that we are going to look at here, and this one is submitted by Julio B. It says, my Italian layout, 8x1 MT at HO scale.
Well, there you go. Now he's in Italy?
It seems that way.
Well, I mean...
Italian layout for sure.
Yeah, now look at the background there. This looks like it's probably a photo background, I'm guessing, but so well done. And busyness, you know, these cars of, looks like gravel or ballast, and a depot platform. You can see a little bit of a depot shed over there on the right, and a retaining wall with an arch built into it in the back, trees. Yeah, I mean, there again, telephone wires. Small space, but very well done, and that's what I really like. I mean, I'm impressed by these people that do such a good job.
All right, we're moving away from our photos now, but before we get into our Q&A, just a reminder, all of those photos were submissions to the MRA Community Gallery, and I have seen there is a link to that in the chat box, so even if you don't have a question, you can still open that chat box, check out the link, and you can submit your layout for a chance to be featured on the next Track Talk Live as well, and make sure to check it out for inspiration. Now, I know we're going to get into our Q&A, but I also know Doug has been very excited about
quick one.
this.
I wanted to show you this. I'm using this on my layout, not in the full size, but I cut sections out of it. I'm modeling Southern California, Riverside, California, citrus area, but I found an online site called greatbigcanvas.com. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
It's fantastic. You can they must have 1 million photographs, and they're very reasonable. You can buy them on canvas, but this is just on paper. And I don't use the sky because I already have sky, so I cut the sky off and then use segments of trees and clumps of trees. So that's pretty cool, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It really looks nice. So that was another one of my projects during COVID.
All right. Well,
I'll have to show you some pictures of my layout now with the backdrops installed.
Oh my goodness, that would be really exciting to have for the next one. Yes. All right. Well, it's question and A time. So I'm going to ask your questions. Answers are going to come from Doug, and we're going to start here with a question that, if you are new to the Q&A box, our chat box, there is a lot of back and forth that can happen in our community, and sometimes there's some crowdsourcing. And this is a perfect example of that. Ed was kind enough to drop in an answer here for John's question, but I'd still like to ask John's question to Doug so that we can talk about it all together on camera here. Now, John is asking, can a DCC and DC train operate at the same time on the same train layout?
Not unless they're independently wired.
So there's some care that you need to take. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how you would manage that?
Well, a lot of guys do that when they're switching over, because DCC can get expensive, especially if you're using sound. And so what guys do is you segment your layout as you would with an old-fashioned analog block system, and then put in a double pole toggle switch so that you can select either the analog or the DCC to that particular segment of track. And so you could have multiple toggle switches and then run multiple sections of track. So on one section of track you could run analog, and another section DCC. You know, like say you had a yard, you could put a yard in a separate circuit and run that one way or the other, as separate from your main line, for example. Does that make sense?
All right. Well, I hope so. If you have further questions, please do let us know. I know Doug is always happy to dig into the details.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to move a little bit more to a general question next, and this one comes in from Ron. Ron says that I am worried that model railroading is a dying hobby. How can we get the youth more involved? What do you think, Doug?
Well, I think it's a changing hobby. I wouldn't say dying, I would say changing. Mm-hmm. And you look at some of these fantastic model railroaders from the old days, 50 years ago they did some fantastic stuff, but they didn't have anywhere near the capabilities that we have now with the electronics and the 3D printing and laser cutting and you name it, all of that kind of stuff. And so we're really lucky to have what we have. I mean, we are able to do much more now just because we have all these resources.
Yes.
And kids like electronics. Well, the model railroading there's a phase of model railroading that is electronics. We're talking about DCC, and there's signaling. You can signal your layout like a real railroad, and so if you want to have a lot of, say, computer kind of action, you can do that on your model railroad. That's the neat thing about model railroading. You don't have to stay with just one thing. You can do electronics, you can do scenery, you can do pretty much anything you want. Just pick your area and go for it.
And I would also add things like social media really
that
help.
too. Do that, yeah.
Sharing anything that you're doing on whatever social media platform you choose, like our community platform here, is a really great way to get people interested, I would say, if they're younger and new to the craft.
We shared black and white pictures in the old days. Can you imagine? So yeah, there's so much new stuff to get excited about, really.
All right, let's keep it going a little bit more general based here with our next question as well. This one comes from Ken. And Ken is curious, Doug, what would your best advice be to a new or a fellow model railroader?
To get started in modeling, do you think? Is that what he means?
I believe so.
Well, really find your niche and maybe experiment around a little bit until you find that niche. Try some different things. There's model railroaders everywhere on the planet, so find some other model railroaders, see what they're doing, see what you're really interested in, and go from there. There's people all over the place that will give you help, including us, of course.
Yes.
But people love to help. Museums, like I mentioned, the Mississippi Coast Model Railroad Museum, where there's guys down there that just love to help out new modelers, like Donovan I mentioned. So just get in there and get your feet wet.
And a follow-on question for that, if somebody's starting out with model railroading, what would be maybe 2 or 3 tools that you think they should have ready to go so that they can be really gung-ho about their first project?
Well, you need to start out with some miniature tools. An X-Acto knife or an X-Acto set, maybe I should say, of knives was always like the most important thing. You could always tell you were a modeler because you had X-Acto knife cuts on your fingers, But, and experiment around with glues and small files and small screwdrivers and go to an art store. There's a lot of interesting artistic tools that you can use for model railroading, say in scenery. Just shop around.
All right, perfect. We do have time for some more questions, so if you have any of those, please go ahead and drop those into the chat box. And as well, I know Doug really was interested if anybody had any quarantine projects, anything that you were spending your time in the past year plus where we had the time in our homes that you want to share, that work that you've done, drop that in the chat box as well. Doug, I'm gonna ask you, what was your first project you dug into? You said you spent a lot of time, obviously, checking off little to-do projects for your...
you mean during COVID?
Yes, during COVID. What did you tackle
Well,
first?
I'll tell you, my layout happens to be out of my garage, and luckily I have a heated garage. And it's fine. It's my own little train space, and I can go out there and just kind of do whatever I want. So that part is perfect. But, over time, things get kind of out of order and misplaced and everything. So my very first project was to organize my train room. Ooh. And I've been putting together boxes, labeled boxes of tools and parts, and I've used different kinds of boxes, those little fishing tackle kind of boxes with the little cubes in them, and then big boxes for other stuff, and big carpenter tools. I've got all kinds of boxes, and then I bought this label printer that prints out like an address label size, I printed out everything, so I can just look across my shelving and pick out what I want. And then the next thing I did was I have a seamstress near me, and I wanted to put curtains above and below my layout. I have shelving above and below my layout, and so I wanted to put curtains on there to kind of hide it. And I found these gray, I think I mentioned this way before COVID, these gray shower curtains at Target.
Oh, yes.
They're nice. I mean, they look like a curtain to me. So anyway, I took them over to my local seamstress over there, and she cut them up and sewed them up to size, and put a Velcro strip on the top, and then I have a little hem in the bottom, and I put a little bit of a small chain in there as a drapery weight. And then there's another place near us. It's a kind of a salvage place called Axeman. I don't know if they have them probably don't have them in other parts of the country, but other places like that. And I bought some small magnets, and so I put small magnets in the hem, so they hang down And then the magnets in the hem hold the curtains perfectly together in the bottom.
That's fantastic.
So that was my first thing. I had to clean up my train room, and get all that organized. And then I got into this backdrop stuff and then detailing. I just basically started at one end of my layout. And looked at it. You got to sit there and kind of look at it. Okay, what I like is you miniaturize yourself, turn yourself into a little miniature person, and walk around. So I'm Riverside, California. Okay, I'm walking around Riverside, California, and if I have a tool in my hand, or if I'm going to go into the railroad shop, or what would I do? Where would I set things down? What would be the typical, what would a typical miniature human do in this space? Mm-hmm. And there again, that's kind of a backstory where you say, well, what was this person doing? Where would they lay parts if they had parts or containers or something? Where would they sit them all down? And so I did that. I'd look at one part of my layout and think about it, and anything, lighting, building lighting, any of that kind of stuff. Like where would a building need an outdoor light or over a loading platform or something like that. And then I just went through all my layout. I took, a foot and a half, 2 feet at a time, looked at it, just sat there and looked at it. Sat there and looked at it and thought about it, and made some notes about what I wanted to do. And then, of course, if I thought about it, and I'd say, okay, well, let's see, I have parts, and I actually know where my parts are.
Hey, they're labeled.
Yeah, what do you know about that? I actually know where these parts are. So anyhow, that's what happened, and I went through that whole thing. I've been working on lighting, of course. I'm using all kinds of these LED strips. I think I figured I had like 9,000 small LEDs on strips over my layout, and using cool in the background to light up the sky, which was a photography trick that I was taught. Cool LEDs on the sky, and then warm LEDs in the foreground.
Oh, okay.
To accentuate the depth. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of cool theatrical stuff like that you can talk about, or ask us, or just try it out. I did watch some Lone Ranger, my favorite cowboy, during COVID.
All right. It's a good time to get in some watching.
Yeah.
All right, I do have time for just a few more questions before I give Doug kind of a chance to talk about what might be coming up, what you might have in mind for some future Track Talk Lives. So if you have a final question to get in, go ahead and drop that in the chat box now before we'll be saying farewell. I want to ask Doug, though, for people that are out there that are looking for ways to purchase some more materials for themselves, for their next projects and their builds, where would you recommend taking a look, especially if you're brand new and might be kind of stuck? Where might they look online, or what might they want to look for in their local area?
Well, everything's, I feel kind of bad that these good hobby shops, these good local hobby shops are kind of disappearing because of internet. But, and I did, like I say, during COVID, I did order things online, and the best is just to keep up with your other local modelers in the area and see what they're doing. Go to model railroad clubs, and there's practically every middle-sized city on up has a model railroad club, and talk to the people and see what they're up to and where they're getting their parts. Send us questions, we'll certainly help you out. I've been in model railroading my whole life. I've done pretty much everything, so we'll certainly help you out. And go to salvage stores for electronic parts, go to art stores for scenery parts. Like I say, I found my curtains in Target. So, you can go to any place. Like when my wife goes shopping, I just kind of wander around and look at stuff and say, well, no, can I use this for my layout? Let me think, like kitchen tools, sometimes you can find kitchen tools that work great for scenery. And so, yeah, just keep your eyes open. And
all right. Well, I'm going to let Doug give us a little of your thoughts onto what you've been noodling about these future Track Talk Lives now that we're back. And also, if you have any ideas of things you might want Doug to talk about on a future Track Talk Live, you can put those in the chat box as well. We do like getting some viewer submissions for ideas and things, so we know what it is that you're looking forward to. So Doug, what do you think you'd like to talk about now that we're back?
Well, I want to use my hands. We want to do some dioramas.
Yes.
I want to use my hands, do dioramas, various scenic tricks, bridges, tunnels, rock walls, all of that kind of thing, and maybe an ongoing series where we start with a little scene that might be a mountain scene with a bridge and a stream and all that kind of thing, and put it together over multiple shows. And I would like to have people comment on what they would like to see as part of it. So yeah, send us your comments and let me know what you would like to see, and we'll talk about anything you'd like.
Of course, of course. I know that some of the demos that we were getting into
Yeah.
were really fun, and
Yeah.
I even got to try a couple
Yeah.
things. So hopefully I'll get to get involved as well. That being said, we've reached the end of our time for this first Track Talk Live back. I'm going to give you a few reminders before we say our farewell. So of course, please, 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 remember to check out our free Inside the Track experience. You want to follow our camera car as it traverses through a variety of layouts for a special tour, and it's right from the track. Click the banner below or the link in the description if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, because you do not want to miss this. I know Doug was excited about it. It's a really exciting thing to follow that camera through the track.
I have more tours on tap, by the way. So now that COVID's over, we can get back out and do things.
So you will want to check that out for sure. That being said, I have to say thank you so much for joining us for Track Talk Live, our first one in 2021, but we are back. We are happy to be back, and we want you to make sure to watch the next one. It's coming up on Thursday, August 19th at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. Doug is going to be back. I will be back as well. Mark your calendars and join us there. So on behalf of Doug, Model Railroad Academy, my name is Leah. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on Track Talk Live. Happy modeling.